Sheriff mocked obese girl, thinking she stole bread, until mountain man yells, "Leave her alone." Sheriff mocked obese girl, thinking she stole bread, until mountain man yells, "Leave her alone." The Idaho Territory sun hung high over Copper Ridge in August 1884. The small mining town's main street bustled with Saturday commerce, miners picking up supplies, families shopping for the week, children running wild between storefronts. 18-year-old Sarah Jennings stood outside Miller's bakery, clutching a wrapped loaf of bread to her chest, tears streaming down her round face. Behind her, Baker Miller pointed an accusing finger, his face red with anger. "Thief! That girl's a thief!" The accusation stopped foot traffic immediately. People turned to stare, forming a growing crowd around the bakery entrance. "I'm not a thief!" Sarah's voice shook with fear and humiliation. "I paid for this bread. I gave Mr. Miller 20 cents. 20 cents for a 30-cent loaf?" Miller's voice carried across the street. "You tried to shortchange me, then grabbed the bread and ran." "I didn't run. You said 20 cents, and I paid exactly what you asked." "Liar, Sheriff! Sheriff Barnes, get over here." Sheriff Owen Barnes pushed through the crowd, his hand resting on his gun belt with practiced authority. At 45, he was a large man who'd served as Copper Ridge's law enforcement for 8 years. He was also a man who made snap judgments based on appearances. His eyes swept over Sarah, her substantial frame, her worn dress, her flushed face, and his expression hardened with contempt. "What's the problem here, Miller? This girl stole a loaf of bread, tried to pay 20 cents for a 30-cent loaf, and when I called her out, she grabbed it and tried to run." "I didn't try to run, and you said 20 cents. Enough!" Sheriff Barnes stepped forward, looming over Sarah. "Give back the bread." "But I paid for it. I have the right change. Mr. Miller said 20 cents this morning when I asked the price." "Sure he did." Barnes's voice dripped with sarcasm. "And I'm sure you weren't just trying to steal food. Again." "Again? I've never stolen anything in my life." "Don't lie to me, girl. Everyone knows your type. You people eat anything not nailed down. Probably thought you could take advantage of old Miller here. Pay less than the bread's worth." The crowd was fully engaged now, some nodding in agreement, others looking uncomfortable but staying silent. "Sheriff, please. I swear I paid what he asked." "Look at you," Barnes continued, his voice rising so everyone could hear. "Fat as a Christmas goose. When was the last time you missed a meal? I bet you eat more in a day than most families eat in a week. And now you're trying to steal bread? Pathetic." Sarah's face burned with humiliation. She'd dealt with mockery her entire life, cruel comments about her size, jokes about her appetite, constant judgment. But being publicly accused of theft by the sheriff himself was a new level of degradation. "I'm not a thief," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then prove it. Empty your pockets." "What?" "Empty your pockets. Show me you paid fair and square." With shaking hands, Sarah pulled out her small coin purse and opened it. Inside were 2 dimes, exactly 20 cents. "See? 20 cents. That's what Mr. Miller asked for." "That proves nothing," Miller interjected quickly. "She could have had more money and hidden it, could be showing us what she paid to make herself look innocent." Barnes nodded agreement. "Sounds right to me. This girl's been stealing, and she's trying to cover her tracks." "I haven't been stealing. Please just ask Mr. Miller what he actually charged this morning." "I know what I charged," Miller said firmly. 30 cents, same as always." But several people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house, spoke up hesitantly. "Actually, Sheriff, I bought bread this morning too. Miller did say it was 20 cents. Something about a special price because the batch came out too dark." Barnes whirled on her. "Are you calling me a liar, Mrs. Henderson?" No, I'm just saying that maybe there was confusion." "There's no confusion. This girl," Barnes grabbed Sarah's arm roughly, making her drop the bread, "is a thief, and I'm arresting her for theft and attempting to defraud a local merchant." "Please, no." Sarah tried to pull away, but Barnes's grip was iron tight. I didn't do anything wrong. Sure you didn't. Just like you didn't eat everything in sight and get fat as a pig. Tell me, girl, when you steal food, do you eat it right away? Or do you save it for later when you need another snack? The crowd laughed. Not everyone, but enough to be devastating. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as Barnes dragged her toward the jail at the end of the street. This is what happens to thieves in Copper Ridge, Barnes announced loudly. Especially fat, lying thieves who think they can take advantage of honest merchants. Leave her alone! The roar cut through the crowd like a thunderclap. Every head turned toward the source. A man stood at the edge of the square, having apparently just ridden into town. He was massive, easily 6'6", with shoulders that seemed to block out the sun. His buckskin clothing marked him as a mountain man, but it was his presence that made people instinctively step back. He radiated danger, like a storm cloud radiates lightning. His face was scarred and weathered, his dark hair hung past his shoulders, and his eyes, ice blue and absolutely merciless, were fixed on Sheriff Barnes with an expression that promised violence. "Who the hell are you?" Barnes demanded, though his hand had instinctively moved to his gun. "Name's Josiah Black, mountain trapper." His voice was deep, rough, carrying easily across the silent square. "And you're going to let that girl go. Right now." "This is law business. Stay out of it." "This isn't law. This is bullying." Josiah stepped forward and the crowd parted before him. "I watched the whole thing from my horse. The baker said 20 cents this morning. The girl paid 20 cents. Now you're arresting her for theft that never happened while mocking her appearance. That's not justice. That's cruelty with a badge." Barnes's face flushed red. "Are you calling me a liar?" "I'm calling you a coward. You saw an easy target, a young woman who's been taught to be ashamed of her body, and decided to exercise your power. Make yourself feel important by humiliating someone weaker. That's textbook cowardice." "I'm the sheriff. I enforce the law. The law says a man's innocent until proven guilty. The law says you need evidence before making arrests. The law says you serve justice, not personal prejudice." Josiah's voice dropped to something more dangerous. "Now let her go, or we'll find out if that badge makes you brave or just makes you think you're untouchable." Barnes looked around for support, but the crowd had gone quiet. Several people were nodding. They'd seen what Josiah had seen, had heard Miller quote 20 cents that morning, knew Barnes was overstepping. "Fine," Barnes said, releasing Sarah roughly. She stumbled, nearly falling. "But she's still a thief in my eyes. Your eyes don't matter. The facts matter, and the facts are: Miller charged 20 cents, she paid 20 cents, no theft occurred. Anything else is just you exercising prejudice." Josiah turned to Miller. "That true? You charged 20 cents this morning?" Miller shifted uncomfortably under dozens of watching eyes. "Well, the batch was a bit dark. I may have offered a discount to a few early customers." "So she paid exactly what you asked?" Yes, I suppose so." "Then no theft occurred, and the sheriff owes this young woman an apology." Josiah's ice blue eyes fixed on Barnes. "A public apology. Right now." Barnes's face went through several shades of purple. "I don't apologize to what? Fat girls, thieves who aren't actually thieves, innocent people you falsely arrested and publicly humiliated?" Josiah stepped closer, towering over Barnes despite the sheriff being a large man himself. "Apologize, or I'll start asking questions about what other arrests you've made based on personal prejudice rather than actual evidence." The threat was clear. Barnes looked around desperately but found no support. Even his deputy standing nearby looked uncomfortable. "I apologize," Barnes muttered, "for the misunderstanding." Louder, and to her, not to the ground. Barnes forced himself to look at Sarah. "I apologize, Miss Jennings, for the confusion about the bread price. It appears there was a miscommunication." Now return her bread and let her leave in peace. Theo. Miller hastily picked up the dropped loaf, wrapped it in fresh paper, and handed it to Sarah with shaking hands. No charge, miss, for the inconvenience. Sarah clutched the bread, still crying, unable to process what had just happened. This stranger, this mountain man, had defended her when no one else would, had called out the sheriff publicly, had forced an apology. Josiah turned to the crowd. Anyone else got something to say about this woman? Anyone else want to mock her size, call her a thief, treat her as less than human? His voice carried cold authority. Because I'm happy to continue this conversation. Silence. People found urgent reasons to be elsewhere. Josiah waited until the crowd had mostly dispersed, then approached Sarah. His expression softened completely. You all right, miss? Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. I'm sorry you had to endure that. No one deserves to be treated that way. He paused. My name's Josiah Black. I live up in the Sawtooth Range, about 30 miles north. Come to town for supplies once a month. Thank you, Sarah finally managed to whisper. Thank you so much for helping me. Anyone decent would have helped. The shame is that no one else did. He glanced around at the few remaining onlookers. This town treat you like this often? Sarah nodded, tears threatening again. Thought so. Cowards always attack the vulnerable. Josiah was quiet for a moment, then made a decision. Miss Jennings, can I buy you lunch? There's a cafe across the street. I'd like to talk to you about something. About what? About a job offer, if you're interested. They sat in the corner of Martha's cafe, away from prying eyes and listening ears. Josiah ordered substantial meals for both of them, beef stew, fresh bread, apple pie, coffee. Sarah started to protest, but Josiah waved her off. You just went through a traumatic experience. You need food. Eat. So Sarah ate, and gradually her hands stopped shaking. I need help at my cabin, Josiah said after they'd both had time to calm down. I trap furs, which means I'm gone for days at a time. While I'm away, everything falls apart. Food spoils, equipment breaks, the place becomes a disaster. I need someone to manage it, cooking, preserving food, maintaining the cabin, helping process pelts. He met her eyes directly. I'll pay $30 a month plus room and board. You'd have your own room, your privacy, and most importantly, you'd be valued for your work rather than judged for your appearance. Sarah stared at him. Why would you offer me a job? Because in the 20 minutes I've known you, I've seen you demonstrate courage under false accusation, dignity despite public humiliation, and the strength to keep standing when most people would have collapsed. Those are valuable qualities. Everything else, he gestured vaguely, is just noise. People will talk. About me living alone with a man in the mountains. Let them talk. Up there, there's no one to hear it except the wind and the trees. His voice was matter of fact. Besides, their opinions about you obviously aren't based on reality. They called you a thief when you'd done nothing wrong. They'll invent scandals regardless of truth. Might as well live somewhere you're respected while they do it. Sarah thought about her life in Copper Ridge. She lived in a tiny room at the boarding house, barely afforded by her wages from taking in washing. She endured daily mockery, constant judgment, and now, after today, would be known as the girl Sheriff Barnes, almost arrested for theft. Her reputation, already poor, was destroyed. What do I have to lose? She said quietly. Exactly. And what do you have to gain? Independence, fair wages, respect, and a life where your worth is measured by your capabilities rather than your clothing size. When would I start? Right now if you want. I'm leaving town this afternoon. Can you be ready in 2 hours? Sarah thought about her few belongings, about the room she rented, about the washing business that barely paid her bills. Yes, I can be ready. Good. Meet me at the livery stable. We'll stop by wherever you're staying so you can collect your things and settle any debts. Then, We head to the mountains. 2 hours later, Sarah rode out of Copper Ridge behind Josiah Black, her meager possessions packed in saddlebags, leaving behind the only life she'd ever known. Sheriff Barnes watched them leave from the jailhouse steps, his expression sour. But he made no move to stop them. Josiah's public calling out had damaged Barnes's reputation, and the sheriff knew better than to push further. As they climbed into the foothills and Copper Ridge disappeared behind them, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The journey to Josiah's cabin took 2 days through increasingly rugged terrain. He proved to be a patient teacher, showing Sarah how to read landmarks, recognize animal tracks, identify edible plants, and predict weather changes. Mountain living requires constant awareness, he explained. One mistake can kill you, so you learn to pay attention to everything. The cabin sat in a hidden valley surrounded by pine forests and towering peaks, with a clear stream running nearby. It was larger than Sarah expected, 2 solid rooms plus a loft with a workshop and smokehouse behind it. Main room is shared. Back room is yours. Bed, chest, window. Privacy when you want it. Loft is mine. Over the following months, Sarah discovered that mountain work was brutal. Hauling water, chopping wood, learning to preserve meat and cure hides, cooking meals substantial enough for someone doing hard physical labor. But it was also profoundly satisfying. There was no one to mock her size as she carried heavy loads. No one to make cruel jokes when she ate heartily after working all day. Just Josiah, who praised her genuinely when she accomplished difficult tasks and never once commented on her appearance, except in practical contexts. "You're strong," he'd say, after she hauled particularly heavy water buckets. "Good instincts." Or, "This preservation technique you developed is excellent, better than what I was doing." Simple praise, honestly given. It transformed Sarah's sense of self. 6 months into her employment, winter locked the mountains in ice and snow. Sarah had proven herself capable beyond Josiah's expectations, and they developed an easy partnership. One evening by the fire, Josiah finally told her why he'd really come to her defense that day. "I had a sister," he said, staring into the flames. "Rebecca. She was built like you, substantial, strong. Our whole childhood, people mocked her, called her names, treated her like she was less than human because of her size." His voice grew rough. "When she was 16, a merchant accused her of stealing, just like what happened to you. Said she was too fat to resist temptation, that girls her size were always thieves. The sheriff believed him because it was easier than investigating. They threw her in jail." Sarah's breath caught. She hanged herself that night, couldn't stand the shame, the public humiliation, the lies everyone believed about her. When they found her, Josiah's hands clenched. "I was 17. I left home that day, came to the mountains, and never went back." "That's why you defended me. That's why I couldn't stand by and watch history repeat itself. When I saw Barnes dragging you to jail, calling you a thief, mocking your body. I saw Rebecca, saw another good person being destroyed by cruelty and lies. I had to stop it." Sarah moved to sit beside him. "Thank you for standing up, for giving me this chance, for treating me like I have worth. You do have worth. You always did. Copper Ridge just couldn't see it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn low, 2 people who'd found unexpected companionship in shared experience and mutual respect. 2 years later, Josiah and Sarah returned to Copper Ridge for supplies. They rode side by side into town, equal partners in a successful mountain trading operation. Sarah sat tall in her saddle, wearing practical but well-made clothing, her face healthy and tanned, her bearing confident. She was still a large woman. Mountain living hadn't changed that, but she carried herself completely differently. Word spread quickly. By the time they reached the general store, a crowd had gathered. Sheriff Barnes was there, older now and somehow diminished. When he saw Josiah, his hand instinctively moved to his gun belt, then dropped. Mr. Black, Miss Jennings. It's Mrs. Black now, Sheriff. Sarah held up her left hand, showing a simple gold band. We married last spring. Barnes's eyes widened. You married her? I married a woman of exceptional character, intelligence, and strength, Josiah corrected, his voice carrying that familiar edge of danger. A woman who transformed my cabin into a home and my solitary existence into partnership. A woman worth 10 of everyone who mocked her 2 years ago. He stepped closer to Barnes, who instinctively backed up. Remember when you called her a thief? When you dragged her through the street, mocking her body, treating her as less than human? You were wrong about everything. She's never stolen a thing in her life. She's honest, hard-working, and capable. Everything you assumed about her based on her appearance was false. Josiah's ice-blue eyes were merciless. But you couldn't see that because you're exactly what I called you 2 years ago, a coward who exercises power over the vulnerable to feel important. Barnes's face flushed red, but he said nothing. Baker Miller approached, looking uncomfortable. Mrs. Black, I want to apologize for that day, for not standing up for you when I knew you'd paid the right price. I was worried about my reputation, worried about contradicting the sheriff. But I was wrong. You deserved better. Sarah studied him for a moment, then nodded. Thank you for the apology. I accept it. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward. Sarah, I'm so glad you found happiness, and I'm sorry we all stood by while you were mistreated. We were cowards, just like Mr. Black said. Other apologies followed, hesitant, awkward, but genuine. Not everyone, but enough to matter. Sarah accepted them with grace. I don't need your apologies to know my worth anymore. 2 years ago, I would have needed your approval, your acceptance, your validation, but not now, because I've learned that my value isn't determined by your opinions. It's determined by my character, my actions, my contributions. She looked around at the assembled crowd. Some of you laughed when Sheriff Barnes called me a thief. Some of you mocked my size, made cruel jokes, treated me as less than human. I forgive you, not because you've earned it, but because holding on to anger would only hurt me. Josiah added, but understand this. Sarah is under my permanent protection. Anyone who disrespects her, mocks her, or makes false accusations will answer to me, and I promise you won't enjoy that conversation. His hand rested casually on his gun belt, the same gun belt he'd carried 2 years ago when he'd first challenged Barnes. The message was clear. They bought their supplies and prepared to leave. As they mounted their horses, Sheriff Barnes approached hesitantly. Mrs. Black? I wanted to say I'm sorry, truly sorry, for how I treated you, for the false arrest, for the mockery, for everything. You were right, and I was wrong. Sarah looked at the sheriff. Older now, his authority diminished, his confidence shaken. Equal. Thank you for the apology, Sheriff. But you should know, you didn't just wrong me that day. You wronged every person who's ever been judged unfairly based on their appearance. Every person who's been assumed guilty because they don't fit society's narrow standards. Every person who's been mocked and humiliated for being different. She straightened in her saddle. I hope you remember that the next time you're tempted to exercise your power over someone vulnerable. Because maybe next time, there won't be someone like Josiah to stand up and yell, "Leave her alone." Maybe that person will end up like Josiah's sister, dead because cruelty broke their spirit. Barnes's face went white. His sister hanged herself after being falsely accused of theft and publicly humiliated, just like you tried to do to me. Sarah's voice was firm. Think about that, Sheriff. Think about how close you came to having blood on your hands because you made assumptions based on someone's size. They rode out of Copper Ridge toward their mountain home, leaving behind a town that would remember that day for years to come. As Copper Ridge disappeared behind them, Sarah felt only gratitude for Josiah's courage in yelling, "Leave her alone," for his offer of employment, for his respect that had transformed her life. The sheriff had mocked her, had dragged her through the street like a criminal, had treated her as less than human. But one mountain man had stood up, loud, fierce, and absolutely merciless, and changed everything. "Thank you," Sarah said to Josiah as they climbed into the mountains, "for that day 2 years ago, for standing up when no one else would." "Thank you for giving me the chance to right a wrong," Josiah replied, "for letting me protect someone when I couldn't protect Rebecca, for building a life with me that honors her memory by proving that people like her, people like you, have immense worth that shallow people can't see." They rode on toward home, two people who'd found partnership and love because one man had been brave enough to yell 3 simple words, "Leave her alone." And those 3 words had changed everything.